Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of Doom Mixtape, and I'm sorry it's been so long since I've done one of these videos. This map is called The Given by Dobu Gabu Maru, and it's a huge puzzle map. Here's the story. Hark, you awake in the land of Ocula. Echoes stir within you as if you have been here before. The vast tower in the center calls to you. Yeah, so this is a giant puzzle map. And there's no combat. You don't have any weapons or health or anything like that. All you're doing is solving puzzles. And there's 6 main puzzles in this giant map that looks like kind of like an eye. I'll show you the auto map in a second. Yeah, it looks like a giant eye. And you know, you look at the ceiling, it's quite breathtaking. This is also a map that if you don't have a decent computer can have trouble running, although there are multiple versions of this map for that reason, for computers that are crappier. But yeah, this was released in 2017 by Dobu Gabu Maru, aka Darryl Steffen. I showed you one map by him before from the Joy of Mapping series. This is a much more ambitious effort. It was actually listed in the Doom World's top 100 most memorable maps list that Doom World did a few years ago. It was number 29. The funny thing though is I haven't seen a lot of people actually playing this map online. And I do think that it's one of those things that there's not always a huge overlap between people who like to do puzzles and people who are really into Doom wads. So I feel like it's harder to find actual clips of this online. However, the Doom Wiki article for it has a guide how to solve each of the puzzles. I consulted it a little bit, but I tried to basically play this on my own. So I guess one thing to say is that I'm going to solve the first puzzle here. That's the easiest, and it's going to take me forever. Excuse me. And when I was playing through this, I was like, should I just redo this? But then I sort of figured it was probably better to show me just trying to brute force this puzzle because I didn't bother to understand it. This is actually the easiest puzzle in the game. So if you do actually intend to play through this map, I would recommend to stop watching probably after I solve this puzzle, because it really will spoil the experience to see how a lot of these puzzles are actually solved. This one I'm just kind of randomly going through these gates. I don't think I'm putting the thought into it that maybe I should be, yeah. So these are various gates and they have 2 colors on them, and when you run through them they lower down those platforms that correspond with a particular color. But obviously if you go through a gate, it lowers down both colors at a time, but then sometimes it doesn't work or only makes one of the colors go down. So I'm not sure exactly how it works actually. Yeah, this map is really interesting because I think the puzzles are generally pretty good. But I think what's the strongest is the atmosphere of the map. There are a few puzzles that I like a lot, and then there are a few that I'm kind of on. This puzzle's okay. It's certainly doable. It's probably the first one that a lot of people look to, and it's the one that's closest to where you enter the map. But I will say I played through this set on my own, or this map on my own when it came out, and I completed I think 4 of the puzzles. I was able to exit the map. So you don't have to do all of them, because it basically what you're basically doing is activating 6 platforms in the center kind of tower area. And you can do these puzzles in any order. This is a big open map. And so you don't actually need to complete all of them. I do for the sake of this playthrough. But there's one in particular that I'm not a huge fan of that I'll do right after this one that I'll talk about. But Yeah, right there I think I could have activated the switch, actually. I think one of those... I don't know why I was trying to activate the center thing, because I could just hit the switch there, and I don't. So enjoy watching me spend another 10 minutes thinking that I had to activate the central platform. It's kind of hilarious that it didn't occur to me that I could just do that. I think eventually I got so frustrated I was like, oh, right, you can just enter from the side. You don't actually have to go from the front. You can just go from one of the sides to activate that switch. So yeah, that was pretty bad. Let's read, so the given, like, most Doom mods comes with a text file, and there's a little story, so I'll read that for you, while you watch me do this horrible, monotonous task. But yeah, you will see more of the map as I go through it, but like I said, after I solve this puzzle, or where, thereabouts, if you want to actually play this map, I would suggest doing it, and I would suggest perhaps not watching the video unless you want things spoiled for you, because it'll ruin the experience a little bit. And this is one of those maps where the experience of mystery is an important part of it, just like figuring out what the puzzle is and all that. I'm glad I had that experience the first time I played through, and there wasn't like a walkthrough or anything like that. So yeah, and you will miss that if you watch through this. So okay, The Given by Dobu Gabu Maru. With hushed tones do the land dwellers speak of the subterranean kingdom of Aquila, home of the unseen god. Legends tell of its lurid foods, crystal-top hills, and rivers of verdant water. But these tall tales also mention how the land is cursed, subject to a strange phenomenon where residents suddenly vanish, where they are mysteriously taken. Taken is capitalized. The denizens of Aquila have sought tirelessly to appease the capricious nature of the unseen god, adorning their houses with wood and marble to avoid its silencing grasp. Perhaps the most well-known of these superstitious rituals, and the one that gives the land dwellers pause when speaking of Aquila, is the sad and brutal rite known only as the Given. Yeah, so I guess you wake up in this strange land. And by the way, the music was actually composed for this map. It's called The Village That Time Forgot, and it's composed by Eris Falling of the Doom community, aka Tristan Clark. Mostly does music, but has designed a few maps. I recognize their name because of the ill-fated project that I originally started and then, went AFK on, basically. Doom 2 in name only, which I do want to actually play a map from at some point. That map got shit on a lot by the Doom community. I think there's some good maps in there, personally, but I don't want to talk about that right now. But yeah, Eris Falling did a map for that, so that's how I recognize the name. But seems to be a pretty accomplished musician within the Doom community. So yeah, like I said, there are 6 puzzles. I was still unaware of the fact that I had already solved this puzzle. Right now I'm kind of like looking at the gates to think like, well, how can I, figure this out? I think there's probably multiple solutions to this one, given that there are, 3 different pathways to enter. Or maybe I found the only solution at the beginning. I don't actually know. Yeah, this is the first one listed on the Doom Wiki, and it has a particular order. It says the switch is now accessible from the eastern side. So I probably did the right thing 5 minutes in, and now I've spent 5 minutes just flailing around. But yeah, I mean, it's nice that he started with the most easy and straightforward puzzle right near the beginning of the map. This map is like, I'd say like the most interesting for all the little details and stuff, like even just kind of figuring out what the puzzle is. It isn't kind of like something like The Witness, where the puzzles are very much, you can tell what the puzzles are because there's those LCD panels. This usually, some of the puzzles you can tell that they're definitely puzzles. This one is pretty obvious, but some of the other ones it's not so obvious. But it's something that hopefully you will figure out, because the intro mentions that big tower, and hopefully it wants to get you to like look at that tower and be like, okay, well, I need to climb that, so that's my goal. So how do I activate these platforms? And then presumably you figure it out from there. So like I said, I played through this on my own and, without a guide or anything the first time I played it, and I got like 4 of the puzzles and, was able to complete it okay. So, yeah, it's not too bad if you're used to it. It's the main thing is like, and I think this is why a lot of Doom maps aren't puzzle based, is, maybe this map is, see here, I've completed it now. But yeah, maybe this map, or maybe this particular puzzle isn't, too movement based, but some of the other ones, like the ones where you're climbing platforms on the in this like castle area, is more movement based. And Doom physics are kind of slidey and not really there for intense platforming. So that can be a little bit difficult. Doom is a little bit of a primitive game in some ways in terms of movement, obviously not having jump, not even having things like ladders or ledge climbs. You have to find, the exact right pathway through things. So, that's something that takes some time to get used to, and obviously I can't, say that as a strike against this particular map because it's designed so well around those particular limitations. But the other thing I wanted to mention is I recently was interviewed. I shouldn't say recently because it was almost a year ago now, but I was interviewed for this series on the streaming platform Means TV called Preserving Worlds, and this guy Derek and Mitchell interviewed a bunch of people, specifically like talking about older online communities, and a lot of the episodes of this series are about, kind of dead online communities that are basically being continually run by, for old dead games that are continually being run by players. So something like Myst Online or LucasArts Habitat. But they also interviewed me to talk about Doom maps, and specifically kind of, I guess, my perspective on them. So, I would definitely recommend checking that whole series out. You can watch all of the episodes on YouTube, except for the Second Life one, which you can watch for free on their service. But you have to have an account to watch. Like, they made a bunch of bonus stuff for it. So if you're interested, definitely check that out. I think they did a really good job with it. The production values were quite nice for, considering we were just, it's relying mostly on gameplay footage. We used some kind of source port that I hadn't used before, where someone could play as like the camera and like do zooms and stuff. And this map is one of the maps that we looked at a little bit. And of course they put the point where I spoil what happens at the end of the map in the series. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but oh well. But yeah, if you've seen that, this is that whole map, and I didn't have time to play through a lot of the really more intense maps because there was just so much to talk about, and we did 2 different interview sessions, so I had a little more time, but it's still like such a massive, subject to talk about the Doom mapping community. So I just tried to do my best job with it. I don't know. I'm sure plenty of people who are, much more active inside the community itself would dispute my framing of things, so I tried to make sure that this was my personal perspective. A lot of the point of these videos is kind of trying to present a more personal lens on these maps from like an outside perspective that isn't kind of influenced necessarily by community consensus on what is the best map or map set, and focuses specifically more on the design and like things that stand out or show really interesting or unusual parts to them, even if it's just in is this where I actually figure out that even if it's just in glimpses. I'm just trying to stall while I'm spending forever on this fucking puzzle. I'm really sorry. I like completed this like several times without knowing it. Yeah, I kind of just wanted to have the process of me figuring this out, because like I said, I played this before, but I played it years ago when it came out, I think originally 2017 or 2018, so it's been a while. I did like, before I recorded this, I did go back and do one puzzle, the castle puzzle. So you'll see me do that really quickly because I spent like enough time figuring it out and like banging my head against the wall and being like, why isn't it working? And not realizing that I just had to like lift one platform one more space. But yeah, here I'm actually gonna wander around parts of the map. I mean, there's so much cool detail in here. I assume this contributes to kind of the lore. This is like some kind of weird elemental altar thing. There's a lot of these building structures that are kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like an old Celtic village. I guess the music really has that Celtic angle to it. There's a lot of different just parts of this map that don't serve any puzzle, means, but are just there for either aesthetic purposes or just the lore. I mean, you can see that I mentioned this in the series, the Preserving Worlds, that this all just uses Doom 2 default textures, but it shows you what you can do with them. Obviously a lot of time was spent on the detailing and like lighting and everything like that, but it's just so interesting to do things that weren't meant to be done in the context of like no one ever could have thought that these textures would be used to make something that looks like this. Here's the second puzzle. This is my least favorite one. So it's these giant islands of switches, and one of the switches is the switch you actually hit, but obviously you need to figure out what one, and you could just, I guess you could just systematically randomly hit ones. It would take a while, but the answer is kind of tricky anyway, and even though I knew the solution, I didn't. I just walked right past the switch that you're supposed to hit. Anyway, yeah, I guess I would recommend you stop watching this video right now if you want to actually play this map. Go download it. It's available. If you have GZ Doom, play it for that. This is like a little guide that shows you. This little thing on the floor is directing me to another area with stars north of here that actually has the kind of key to answer this puzzle. So, the tips are good. It's just like what the actual answer is itself that I think was a little tricky, and even knowing it, I kind of didn't quite figure it out yet. But yeah, it involves these stars. This map looks so cool when you look at the ceiling. It's really cool. I don't know, the giant slabs of flashing light and all that kind of stuff. I think I'm looking at the wiki article now because I'm like, what? Wait, what are you supposed to do? This is definitely one I did not complete when I completed this map, so I had never done this puzzle before this point. But the giant slabs kind of remind me of some of the later maps in Alt, which I've talked about many times, like map 28 and 29, that have that giant like mouth kind of thing. I presume it's influenced by that. I don't know. I keep talking about alt, and then like no one in the Doom community likes it. I think because it's very much against the kind of way that maps are designed within the Doom community, and it's made by an outsider. And of course, if you're within a community, I mean, this is something I talked about actually in the preserving worlds thing. It's like community cultures are so specific that like and of course there are like different parts of the community too, but like people who are viewed, there's a kind of a consensus that develops in like people that kind of things coalesce around that they want outsiders to see as the thing that represents the community. And there is a popularity contest angle to that, and there's also certain like aesthetic values that are favorited that maybe certain things don't carry, and thus my fear is that those things will invariably get forgotten because people within the community don't value them because they don't hit the values of whatever they think the community should reflect, and no one else outside it's going to play it. They're going to look at all the recommendations from people inside the community. So no one is basically going to say, hey, this thing is actually really cool, unless someone on the outside says like, hey, like even if you're not into Doom mods, maybe you should play this. And that's kind of, I mean, most communities are, interesting sources of creativity, but I'm not going to pretend that like, most maps are gold or anything, but that's exactly why I think doing a series like this is, that's like my intention, is to highlight specific things, just from like having played various things. Whenever you play like, I don't know, whenever I play Doom Megawatt, there's invariably like one map where I was like, that map was cool, but like these 5 maps around them, they're functional. Maybe the combat is interesting. Maybe there's a few interesting encounters, but they don't have that overall sense of like, I feel something from this. And I don't know how to describe that, but my reactions seem to be completely different from a lot of people within the community. And I do think that there's a case of like, if you are too close to something, you lose perspective. And that's why I kind of value being an outsider to this stuff and only kind of coming in occasionally and playing things that I think are, more interesting to me personally. Okay, so this is like a little key for these islands correspond with the switch, the blocks of green that had the switches on it. And you can see one place is under the light, and there is a tiny, tiny skull there. That shows you the location of the skull switch. Now, it's a little tricky because this would lead you to believe that it's like the first full skull switch on that side, but it's actually like a half switch. And when I like go over there to actually look at it in this map, I'm just trying to make sure right now that I know the location. If you look at the bottom part of the map, south, this is what these things correspond to that. These little green slabs here correspond to those. It is a clever idea. I just like, I think the reason why he had the switch on like on an angle to where it's like you have to hit the part that's only like part of the switch is so it's harder to just brute force it. But that also means that like I know where it is, and yet I still couldn't get it because it didn't occur to me that it would be that. So this is why this is my least favorite puzzle, basically. There's a lot of interesting ideas to it. I like the giant skull switch island, just like that concept aesthetically, but this puzzle didn't fully work for me. So yeah, it should be right. I completely passed. You can see I just passed by it. There was a tiny switch there, and now I'm very confused because I'm like, this should be it. Oh my god. But yeah, so now I'm like, what the hell? I just saw where the answer was, and yet there's no switch here. So I had to go back and like actually look up the And I was standing too far away from the wall there, so of course I didn't hit it. I went past the location several times and hit like right next to it, but not actually the thing, which is kind of obnoxious. Even there, I hit the corner. Yeah, so I'm gonna go all the way back to the main area and check this out again, because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So yeah, not my favorite puzzle. I stopped like right there and didn't hit it. That's amazing. I didn't realize how many times I like went past the location of it and somehow didn't hit it. That's also what made me think that I just was completely missing something. Or that like this was an old version of the map, or the guide was for an old version of the map. I was like so confused about that. But yeah. By the way, the puzzles I think are pretty decently demarcated in different parts of the map. Like this one is on the south part. The other one was in like the far east area. There's one in the far west area. There's one sort of in between the skull switch and the one on the far west. There's one on the north area, and then there's one on the like a large swath of places, which might be my favorite actually. Yeah, there's one that involves like, you know, kind of progressing through a town area that I like a lot, because it covers a decently large chunk of I think it's in the north area of the map, north of here. But yeah, I don't know, this map is obviously well regarded within the Doom community. It was listed on the, you know, top 100 most memorable maps. Dobu has made a billion different maps. A lot of them are very combat heavy. I obviously showed one from, you know, a 3-day map jam that was still very interesting. He has other ones like Saturnine Chapel, I think was also a very well regarded one, and a bunch of others. I might play another one of his maps at some point. He also ran the Doom World Megawad Club for a long time. I don't think he does it anymore. I don't know how active he is in the community, but he's someone who's like very active and very well known within that section of the community, in spite of making some things that are a little more, you know, artistic and weird. But I'd say this map is the most, because even though it's well recognized within the Doom community, like I said, because it's kind of different, I don't see as many people talking about it or as many people have played it. It's one of those things that they, you know, a lot of people who play Doom, they don't like puzzle maps, because that's not why they play Doom, etc., etc. So I don't know. I mean, I'm always down for the idea of like hijacking something that was intended for a different purpose and like doing whatever you want with it, because I feel like that's the point of modding. I feel like there are certainly some people who are purists who are much more like, oh, it should be this way, but I feel like that defeats the purpose, especially if you're doing it for free. Like, if you have this outlet for creativity, why not use it? And I mean, of course, Doom is limited in some ways, and I, you know, don't want to overstate that, because Doom isn't maybe the best use of being just a pure canvas of creativity. Obviously, there are limits to it, but I feel like the way that some people, and I feel like people don't do this as much now, but even like 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, the way that people were being kind of very prescriptive about, there you go. That's the switch that I needed to hit. The way some people were being very prescriptive about what, you know, Doom mods should look like, what Doom levels are. Even like my friend JP LeBreton, like his essay about Doom as first-person Robotron, which I think he wrote in like 2007, so I'll give him some credit. I still do think that, I mean, at the time that was insightful, but I think that there's, I think that is a limiting perspective, and I made this point many times, but a game like Doom is good because it's multifaceted, and I think there's this tendency towards design reductionism, reducing things to a particular mechanic, which I don't see as much now, but like a lot of people have a tendency to do, especially in the tech games space. This is the castle puzzle, by the way. I like this puzzle. I mean, it's one that feels more like something like The Witness or something like that. It's self-contained. You know pretty much what you have to do. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it. So I'd say this is one of the better of the 6 puzzles, definitely. Even though I struggled because I didn't... I got stuck on something very stupid when I first played through this. I didn't, like, lift the blue platforms up one more than how they were before, and I was like, oh, this is impossible. But yeah, I feel like there's a big tendency towards reducing things to a particular mechanic or an idea and ignoring all the different elements that go into something being successful. And I feel like the 100% the reason why a Doom is not a game that can be replicated is, I mean, obviously it's a product of time and place, but it's also a product of just trying a bunch of different things at once and seeing how they kind of mesh together. It's not just the product of one author, it's the product of a few, the personalities and sensibilities of a few different people. And it's not even necessarily the game that they wanted to make. I mean, if you know anything about id Software, like Doom was supposed to be more of a story-based game when Tom Hall was in charge of the story, and then Wolfenstein 3D was supposed to be a stealth game. Quake was supposed to involve like much more like kind of jumping and interesting mechanics, and like a big reason why a lot of the creative people left id Software was because things just kept being simplified, and eventually that led to a decline in the quality of things that they were making. You know, Quake is what a lot of people consider the last great game by id Software. I mean, I'm sure there's defenders of later games too, and people like the new Doom and all that kind of stuff, but it's a completely different, you know, sensibility and time and place now, so I wouldn't even compare those. But yeah, I think a lot of people would claim that Quake 1 is the last good game that they made. Yeah, okay, so that was the castle puzzle. This one's interesting. I totally figured this out myself doing this. I think I had completed this puzzle before, though. Basically, these candle platforms are responsible for lifting up platforms in the center. So I'll hit the switch and like there are like 5 different steps to that staircase, and stepping over certain things will make those steps go up, and stepping over certain things will make it go down. So like the candles with the like 2-unit columns make things go up, and the ones with 1 unit make it go down. I don't know why there's other ones, because you can't go over those. So it's maybe a little, you know, if you were designing this towards clarity, then maybe you wouldn't do certain things. But I mean, part of this map is the atmosphere, and I figured it out eventually. Right now I'm just kind of randomly going over stuff, but there's a little pit over there that actually explains what you need to do for this puzzle. It's basically like a key, so that really helps with understanding the puzzle. If you stumble around enough, you'll figure it out, which is good, I think. Especially when, obviously, you know, if you listen to someone like John Blow talk about puzzle design, he would say, you know, you want to design things first and foremost with the intent of like clarity of communicating, stripping it down to its barest elements where you really understand what the puzzle is and what the stakes are, and like how people should do it so they're not caught on like confusing things. Obviously, this doesn't do that, partly because, I mean, the aesthetic experience is really a strong part of this whole map to begin with. Yeah. Okay, so this is the pit that describes how to do it. So that that third platform obviously was down, but you see me running over it 3 times caused it to activate that staircase so that I can get out. So it forces you, like, if you want to get out of this pit that you'll probably invariably end up in, you will figure out that running over this thing causes it to move up 1 unit, and then running over the 1 unit candle causes it to go all the way down. So now it's just a matter of me figuring out which areas here correspond with which of the steps, and that's actually kind of confusing because some of them don't do anything. I think that one doesn't do anything. Some of them, the one candle will do something, or like stepping over certain things will make one platform go down, but then there won't be one that makes them raise up. So I'm trying to figure out which of these like little areas. You can see there's about 9 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think there's 7 or 8 of them, not counting the pit that I was in. And now I'm just trying to figure out which of them correspond to which, each unit on the thing. So I'm just making an educated guess. And I guess by process of elimination, I figured it out. Although, it would be nice if there was some other indicator. But this is something that there's enough elements of the puzzle. There aren't too many elements to where I can actually figure this out on my own. So it's not straightforward in that, like, the farthest away one is the first step and the closest one is the last step. It's not something like that. It's more complicated than that. Or I should say maybe more random than that. They correspond with just different parts of the thing. And me just running over each of them to figure out what has changed is the thing that I'm going to be doing in the next, 10 minutes while I'm trying to complete this puzzle. I also like this graveyard area over here. I don't think it serves any purpose. It just looks really neat. I might use it as the picture for this episode when I go down in there later. So you can see I have some critique of the puzzle design. I think, I think things could be a little bit clearer, and I would tend to want to go for things that are clear, and then just having more puzzles, maybe making a few of the puzzles a little bit easier and less esoteric, and making more of them. But as it is, it doesn't really take away from the map. Like, I think overall I enjoyed the experience, and I don't think it really took away from the experience, partly because so much of this is just aesthetic. So much of it is like just kind of trying to make sense of what the world is, which is, it's a very more of like a Myst-like approach to puzzles, as opposed to the more kind of modern puzzle designy games like The Witness, or like Steven's Sausage Roll, one of my favorite games. If you like puzzles, if you like this map, or you're intrigued by it, I would strongly recommend Steven's Sausage Roll, which sometimes goes on sale on Steam. It's a pretty expensive game for what it is, but it's a really, really long and hard game, so believe me, that amount of money is worth it for what the experience you actually get with the game is. I really enjoy that, and like there's a couple that I played recently, one called a Monsters Expedition Through Puzzling Exhibitions. That's a more beginner-friendly puzzle game. I thought that was pretty good. And I like Cosmic Express by the same creator, Alan Hazelden, and others. I like that one even a little bit more, Cosmic Express. And yeah, Steven's Sausage Roll is by Stephen Lavelle Increpara, who I think I've done a few videos about some of his games before, but I probably want to do more in the future. Okay, so right now I was trying to figure out which one is the third step, and I finally figured it out. So I'm just going to go back there and make sure it's raised the amount of necessary steps. So I just figured that out, which is cool. Yeah, there you go. So I just need to activate that one more, and then activate the fourth one more, and then find whatever the fifth one is, which is the main thing. So it's just like doing the mental calculus in my head. But this is one of the things where maybe you want a sheet or something to like help you figure out, you know, which is which. So you can see I already stepped over the fourth one, but not as much as I need to. So it's one I already stepped over, but of course I wasn't keeping track. So right now I'm trying to figure out which is which. Yeah, I think I looked at the one closest to me, but I don't think it's either of the ones closest to where I'm standing right now. I think it's one of the ones a little bit farther away. But yeah, as far as I can tell, there's no logic behind the number of candles that are in specific stations. I think that's just like a red herring. There might be that I don't understand, but I didn't I couldn't make sense of one if there was. So yeah, I guess that is one complaint I would have about it. I would want the numbers of, you know, what's on each of those islands to kind of correspond with something. So yeah, I guess I just found out where where one of them, I think this is the third one, or no, maybe that's the last. Yeah, I think that's the last platform that I finally moved up. So I need to move that one up more. So I'm still trying to figure out what the fourth one is. Yeah. But I'm almost done. But then, of course, some of these, you can see I'm almost there. But some of these cause the fourth one to go down, the last platform to go down all the way again, or at least a few different spaces down. You can see that right there. It just caused it to go all the way down right there. So I think that tells me that, you know, I don't want to mess with those series of candles. Those don't do anything. You know, that's a red herring or whatever. So in order to get back to where I need to go, I just run over this several times. And yeah, I guess the changes aren't there until you like hit the switch to make them go down, and then hit the switch to make them go up again. So that's how you like reset it so that you know where your position is. So yeah, I generally like this puzzle. Like I said, I figured this one out by myself. It's also one of those that is like the area where it is, you know, marked off appropriately. So I know, so I know that this is for sure a puzzle that I need to figure out, and it involves these candles and everything. So that obviously wasn't the right one. You can see it made that platform go all the way down again. So that tells me that I don't need to worry about that area. Yeah, this is one of the things where having like a pencil and paper or something, having a place to make notes is definitely helpful. I mean, I was just doing it in my head, but I imagine if this map was any longer or there were any more parts to it, I would definitely want to do that, because, yeah, it really helps and it really saves time. But, yeah, I can understand why a lot of people don't want to play through or don't want to stream, especially puzzle maps like this, because, I mean, one thing is, like, it's hard to communicate what is interesting about it because so much of it is going on in your head. Like, the answer is the answer, but the process of, like, the gameplay is a lot of it is going on in your head. So it's hard to communicate that. And also, I think there's a lot of anxiety of, like, if I were streaming some of this or just recording this, I wanted to show this map for a while, but I was anxious about recording it because I didn't want to take forever, which I did in this one. So I guess I kind of figured, fuck it, because it's a nice space to be in, even if I'm struggling with some puzzle, or struggling because I didn't realize that I actually solved it. Yeah, I think I hit the wrong platform there. That was the second one. So I had already gone over that. I didn't realize that but I didn't know which one was which. This is one you have to be a little bit more systematic with your actions and understand which corresponds with which before you just go willy-nilly running over a bunch of these and seeing what happens. Which, again, I like because it requires, like, actual focus. I think the color gates one is a little bit more just random. And you can semi-brute force it, but this one, like, you actually have to concentrate on, because if you just keep running over random candles in random places, you'll activate certain things but not know which you've activated and what corresponds to what. So if you're actually trying to solve it, then that's not very helpful, because then you have to, actually, piece out which one is which. So I think this is the one that I needed. The one that was farthest away from me was the 4th platform. I noticed there were 4 candles there, so I don't know if that is trying to say something, but there were others that have 4 candles, so I don't know. I presume there was some logic to it, but yeah. If there wasn't, then, it is what it is. Okay, well, I've completed this one now. So now I got 3 of them, and I'm like probably 2/3 through this video, so the other ones don't take quite as long. Wait, no, I've done 4, right? Yeah, because I just did the castle. So yeah, there's a couple others. I like this graveyard area here a lot. I think this is why it would be cool to see something like this map where there were a bunch of different puzzles, and maybe or maybe it could even be a hub. Imagining this as a hub where it's like Mario 64. These send you to different zones. You could probably do that with Z-Doom. I think that would be so cool. It's like the graveyard area sends you to a graveyard level, and you could do them in any order or something like that. I've always thought about that, having a more non-linear progression to do maps, or having it so you can complete certain things at different times. There's some sets with Z-Doom that do that, but it's not obviously most people tend to stick to the default progression, I think, just because it's it's tried and true, and that's fine. But yeah, it is interesting to think about how you could mess with some of that stuff. Okay, so now I'm going to the town one. So I'm just trying to figure out, the town basically is this, I like this. This is like a merchant. I imagine this is like an imaginary merchant who's selling specific things. Obviously there's no people in it. It's like a ghost town, but I imagine those as products that are being sold. And I guess these are supposed to be glass windows, that texture. That texture, I think, was based off of id Software's offices at one point. That was a big black tower. I don't know if the Doom 2 Master Levels map Black Tower was inspired by that or just the texture itself, but anyway. Yeah, so right now all I really need to do is go up to the northmost area of the town, and that will show me an arrow that will guide me on a little scavenger hunt through the town, to specific places. And, as I go through, more arrows will activate. I like this one. It's a little bit, you have to realize that I kind of thought that things would just appear when I got to that certain area, and I didn't realize you have to hit specific parts on the wall, which I guess makes sense if you're used to Doom logic. There's only so many ways to activate something. But yeah, here I'm trying to activate this platform. It's like a mini version of this map in total. I love that eye, by the way. And this is the arrow. This is the first one I'm following. Yeah, so I want to follow that. And you can see right now there's a little trim, there's a little vertical trim of 2 columns or 2 trim on the wall. And that's where I'm supposed to hit. I didn't think I realized that yet, but it takes a little while for me to figure that out. And the arrow will appear on this circle. Yeah, that vertical trim that I'm looking at right there. Right now, I think I'm thinking, oh, maybe I need to go beyond this. It's not 100% clear, but once you figure it out, I mean, it does require a little bit of wall humping, some of these, but I figured it out. And, for me, when I figure something out eventually, there's a level of good enough, yeah, I could make this clearer, but given the amount that was already spent, the amount of energy that was already spent trying to convey this idea in a way that people would actually get, if most people eventually understand it, even though it's not 100% pure, and clear as possible, for me, that's good enough. Now, if you were making a big commercial game, maybe you wouldn't want to do that. But if you're making a Doom level or like a smaller puzzle game, then for me, that's what I would consider good enough. And like most of these puzzles, other than the skull one, I would consider good enough. And if it's by a person who doesn't normally make puzzles, then that's cool. I don't know. I always want there to be more components to a lot of Doom levels. I feel like so many Doom levels have a tendency to rely on certain cliches about how they progress, like when are certain enemies introduced, and there's only so much you can do with particular textures and particular enemies. And what I love about this map is it just throws every single cliche out of the window, and it's completely making up its own rules in the most like, I don't know, in the most like anarchic is not a great way to describe it, but in the most like obvious way possible. Like, this is clearly demonstrating that this is a town where all the rules of how you would normally progress through a space are thrown out, and you kind of have to figure out your own way, which I love. I love using this as like a vessel to kind of create your own place, your own place with its own rules and its own kind of principles with which it operates by. That's why I love Alt so much. Is because even though a lot of maps are more conventional combat oriented, it does feel like something that operates by its own rules, and something where the cliches get thrown out the window. And I think people tend to value those cliches way too much when they get immersed in these communities, because they don't understand how much they are cliches, I think, because they're just something that are kind of seen as a way of like how you do things. Or maybe there's a part of it, it's like showing your fealty, showing your like allegiance to this community by participating in X or Y cliche, and doing the rite of passage in your fraternity or sorority or whatever. I don't know. There's an element of that, and I don't like that, obviously. I don't feel like that's something that should have to happen. And the Doom community is big enough to where there's different zones and different people doing different things, but that's definitely an element. I mean, there's some really hardcore people who are just really stick to those cliches and think that other stuff that isn't as interesting, and that I don't think those people understand like that something like Doom is such a strange thing to even exist in the first place, and all the rules and all the ideas that people have of what first-person shooters are and how things should be and how things should exist were just kind of made up on the fly. And I mean, it like most people know like the story of Doom enough to know that like that is the case, like that is like that is just people trying to kind of going by the seat of their pants, trying to figure out what this thing is, and making it based on just, all their previous experiences making games, and just kind of trying to see what they can do with it. How can they use this technology? I think, to me, that's always like the most exciting part of the process of like doing things with games, is just seeing like, well, how can we do something unexpected? How can you do something with these tools that someone hasn't done before? And like at this point in time, technologically, people can do so many different things, but it's not about whether it really isn't about whether you can do something. It's about how you do it, how you contextualize it, And something like this map just feels like it really reminds you that that's possible, which is great. I don't know. I feel like this is a great map to show people who are outside the Doom community, just like give them a kind of glimpse of something that you could do with these tools, with this like setup, that is just completely different. And obviously I know that like Doom Builder and all that stuff isn't necessarily made towards like the ways that certain things within the engine work are a little fussy. And I mean, ZDoom and certain scripting things make this easier, but this is a map that's just a default boom map, so it has to rely on certain rules about, you know, how you can activate certain things, how switches operate, and all that kind of stuff, that maybe, you know, feel like artificially limiting. I don't know. That's always been I feel like that's the case with so many like particular communities. I've noticed this with like my limited experience with people that I've talked to about the interactive fiction community, is like the people who are hardcore and been involved in that space a long time are very invested in certain tropes being followed, and are not necessarily always open to when they're not followed, and they don't necessarily understand how people on the outside who are playing this stuff are going to view it much differently than they are. And that's where like shedding outside light on this stuff, I feel like, is really useful. Okay, so I'm pretty close to completing this. Just the experience of walking through this town is nice. I mean, a lot of these buildings look the same, but there's just so many little touches. I think at some point there's like a really goofy looking windmill that I'll walk by. Maybe that's later in the map, or later in this playthrough, but yeah. And I guess this is like supposed to be a garden. I don't know. It makes me think of like a, you know, like hedge maze type setting. I don't know. I like how you can interpret so much. It's so open to interpretation what something actually represents in this game. It's kind of like that about a lot of old games. I don't know. I remember reading an interview with John Romero and Tom Hall talking about the design of like, especially like their game like Hover Tank or things like that, where he's like, you know, this wall represents like a, you know, like a tree, and this one represents like, you know, just like being very, very abstract with it. And like, that is the thing with games, is I feel like if you're designing something and you believe that it is that thing, that belief will transfer, even if it doesn't necessarily look to someone else like a tree or like a column or whatever. The fact that you've invested it with some sort of meaning will be felt when you play through it. You'll feel that. Obviously, having more components and details helps to convey those things, but you know, you don't always have the means to do that. Okay. Yeah, so here's the last puzzle here. This one I figured out pretty easily by myself, at least how to get into it. You can see this whole area is not on the auto map that's kind of inside this giant spiky looking thing. And if you look on the auto map, you can see that there's one of these like weird little marble things with the red fire column above them. That doesn't show up on the auto map. It's this one, so you can, and that's something I figured out by myself, like, which I consider, you know, some people might be like, oh, that's too easy. I consider that good though, if most people can figure that out if they actually look at stuff. I think that's the mark of like good puzzle design. So there's this whole like, I don't know what to call it. There's like mini bookshelves. But these are just kind of the area outside the actual, what is basically a hedge maze that I need to walk through. And this is the classic Doom TNT map 30, kind of like you have to walk, you know, on these panels in a certain direction, otherwise it'll teleport you out of the maze. Obviously, unlike TNT map 30, it doesn't just instantly kill you. I don't know. There might be clues on how to actually complete this maze. Excuse me. But I did it very trial and error. So I don't know. I was originally trying to do the GoldenEye, like Egypt level path, because I'm like, oh, maybe it's that. But no. This one's actually kind of tricky because you have to go back after you go forward, and that didn't occur to me until later. I kind of had to have some help on this one. I mean, but this is something that there's only so many spaces you can walk in, so through trial and error you can do it, and like it's maybe not the greatest thing, but it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, not my favorite of these puzzles, but I still think it's fine. I appreciate the variety of different kinds of puzzles too. Like some of them require much more active like thought and planning, and some of them are a little bit more almost like environmental hazards, the kind of thing you would maybe encounter in like a regular Doom WAD at points. This is a trick, like it lets you move forward there, but there's nowhere to go from there, which confused me. That was a very tricky thing. Yeah, there might be, like I said, there might be specific rules to how to get through this thing, but there's so much in the world that it's hard to tell. Okay. What else is there to talk about? I do want to say the Preserving Worlds series. I talked about a bunch of different maps, many of which I've talked about on Doom Mixtape. I talked about alt map 13, which is, something I really like and has a different sensibility, but it has a similar thing of like going through the level and activating specific areas in order to like lower or raise a central thing in order to get you to the end of the level. So I feel like there's an interesting connection between that. Well, this map also, this map is not something, if you download this map and you play it, you're playing it because you want to play a map like this. So it's very straightforward about what it is. Whereas in the context of a megawad, you could be beset by almost anything. And that is what I like about megawads in their ideal form, is that there can be so many different kinds of things that you have to encounter, like listening to a really compelling album that are just unexpected because there's no prior framing to them. And that's why, I really value that, but a lot of people don't. I feel like so much of the trend of art these days is to tell people exactly what they're going to expect, because people don't want to be beset by something unexpected because they don't want to be terrorized by it. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of a bummer because so much about what I like about, I probably said this before, but I'm like very obsessed with Wolfenstein 3D as much as Doom, maybe if not more, partly because that game, there's so many different weird things that happen in the context of these, ostensibly samey levels. Like, all of a sudden there's a required path in like a secret area or whatever. And maybe some of them are not the greatest ideas, but the fact that they only bring that out occasionally, or, there'll be one, episode 4 is my favorite because it does this all the time. There'll be like one level where they give you a key that you don't need to use at all, and nowhere else in the game do you have it. Are you ever given a key that you don't need to use? So I really like that, but it doesn't usually and like in its best form, that's what I like about megawads, is you can, of a bunch of different authors, is you can encounter a lot of different kind of sensibilities, but it usually doesn't come together in that way. There isn't necessarily a committed effort if you're working within a smaller group of people to create that kind of experience, because usually you're creating a specific kind of experience for a specific audience and a specific intent, which I don't know. I just kind of feel a bummer about that because it feels kind of artificially limiting to me. But then I guess if you make something that is so varied and out there, then there's a chance that it's for no one. So I don't know the answer to that, but sometimes it bums me out because I do want to be like, I do want to be taken somewhere. I do want to be given, I do want to have this experience of unexpectedness, and I don't know why that became such a not as a common thing to like experience anymore. I don't know. I've had people, make comments that like things that I've done have had that experience for them, which is exciting to me, but I always thought that that's kind of what most people wanted to do, is like you wanted to give people something unexpected, and I feel like there are a lot of people who don't want that. So I don't know. I feel like a lot of assumptions that I've made about art and how other people want to experience them have been thrown out the window the more that I've been on the internet or been in other places. But I still feel like there is something there. Like, people do want something different. They want something unexpected. They want something that's going to make them think a different way about stuff. They're just not always... they don't always know where to look for it, and they don't always know that they want it. Or they're a little scared of it because the unknown is scary. But maybe that's why a lot of people haven't actually played through this map. Like I said, this map is not that hard. It really isn't. I mean, I find there's so many maps that way more people have played that I find way more difficult than this map. I don't consider the puzzles to be very hard. It just takes a while, and it is anxiety-inducing knowing that, like, if you don't use your brain, then you won't get out of something. You can't just brute force it. So you have to put yourself in a different state of mind, and there's a lot of anxiety around doing that. Okay, so I've activated all the 6 platforms. I'm just going to show you the nice little pit and walk around a little bit before I get to the exit. But there's one more puzzle that we have to do before we exit the map. If you've watched this long in this video, by the way, I appreciate it. I'm glad that you have made it through this much of me rambling, and because I know that that's not a very big audience, but presumably some people at least appreciate it. Yeah. So this is a nice little garden. I guess those are like fruits. Those like water droplet looking things. These are like some kind of root vegetable or something, or like they're toxic. I love that windmill so much. It's so love the janky windmill. Those are assumed bamboo, like that's what I assume, because you're walking through it, or like giant stalks of corn or something. Yeah, you see the eye again. Okay, here I am. And you can see as I'm climbing this tower, there are a bunch of different symbols, and I kind of created like, I called that one Space Invaders, or like spaceship, and the other one flashlight and stuff, just to help me like have a way to remember what these specific things are. But yeah, I think this is a good idea for a puzzle. I call that one High-Heeled Shoe. It's just, yeah, it's easier if you have associations with particular things, objects, to help you remember what the thing actually is. This puzzle isn't very hard, though. Basically, you just have to walk over all... When I get to the top part, there's like 6 of these symbols around the center area, and I just have to walk through the passages that correspond with these symbols, and if I get one wrong, then it'll send me back. So I have to get all 6 of them in order. So it's not hard, but you just need to... There are a few that look like that. I call that one lightning bolt, but yeah, that one's a little confusing. That one's like an off-center V or something. I feel like the symbols, though, are different enough from each other to where I was able to figure it out, basically. Yeah, and that's the last one. It's like a Tetris block or something. It would be interesting to see like a whole like Celtic themed Doom mod that like really emphasizes those environments and like has music like this. Maybe like the maybe an emphasis on, maybe there's some combat, but there's an emphasis on like atmosphere and exploration and puzzle solving. I feel like that could be really interesting. I always say that, and then I'm never committed enough to try to make something. I mean, you can see how much effort something like this takes. This is not. This is quite ambitious, which is again what I love about doing these sets, is that people can be very ambitious within a pretty limited set of tools, and I think there's a lot going on here that I don't even see in a lot of polished products, whether they're commercial games or indie games. Yeah, this is gonna take a little bit of time. That was the wrong lightning bolt. Yeah. What else could I talk about? Well, I hope everyone's having a good May. Lockdown measures in a lot of places are opening up, and a lot of other places not necessarily. I've been able to get vaccinated, but I know a lot of other people in a lot of other countries who haven't been able to, so that's a huge bummer. I don't know. I'm just tired of being inside all the time. This is going to date this video to 2021, but who cares? Everything we do is dated. It's dated instantly the moment that it's out there. Yeah, so you can see I'm just trying to walk through all the correct ones. I'll figure it out eventually. That's the Space Invaders. I think that's the wrong Tetris block. Nope, that was the right one. But not that one. That's the right Tetris block. But I got the wrong V, so I have to do it all over again. Have to do it all over again. I'm gonna be bummed, like, I don't know, there's something about the atmosphere of this map that's nice. I just kind of, I hope for more of this kind of stuff in the future, because, even in the context of coming out in 2017, when there's been a lot of interesting and kind of weird Doom maps, that come out every once in a while, that like every year, I feel like every year there's something that's just kind of different and unusual. What was that? The Alfonzone was one of those kinds of sets too, I think. But yeah, even then, this is not like anything else I've ever seen anyone do with Doom wands. But yeah, I'm almost there. I'm almost there. This could be like you could make a whole, this could be like a whole big Unity game or something like this, where you're in this world and you're just solving mysterious puzzles. I guess there's a lot of walking simulators out there that are kind of like that. Okay, finally, I'm taking the lift all the way up to the top. And this is the part that was spoiled in the Preserving Worlds video, unfortunately. Yeah, the giant flashing column reminds me of Alt Map 28 a lot. Just a nice way to convey caverns. You can see the way that individual sections were lit, so it's like emphasizing it to make it... I mean, this map uses lighting really well. You don't necessarily even think about the lighting unless you're in a dark or particularly bright area, but the way that like emphasizes particular details is really important, and it's the difference between something looking super bland and just slabby and it looking really interesting. Okay, yeah, this is a sacrifice yourself. There's that like Bible type book. There's the town that we were in. I like that view. I might use this as the title card actually of the video. It looks so nice from up above. It's like being in an airplane. But yeah, here's the end. This is your fate, unfortunately. Dead. Yeah, now we're in the land of the dead, I guess. I'm going to read this description on the Doom Wiki. It says, upon completing the ritual, the player is taken to the second map, entitled Taken, which serves as an ending cutscene. This epilogue uses the music track I can't pronounce that, which is a reprise of part of the main map's music track. The player finds themselves on an island in the middle of an infinite sea, containing only the guillotine, their separated head and body, and a large number of candles, and the table with the book on the knife that was also found on the tower. Notice how now that the knife is clean. Hopefully I looked by that. There's nothing else in this map, so the player can quit at this point. I love this just vibe, ambience. It's so nice, the washing waves. It's a really nice ending to something like this. I'm glad that he made another map here. But yeah, this was Doom Mixtape. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love these details here. I love that tree. You can see the guillotine is gone now. Yeah, so nice. But thanks so much for tuning in. I'm gonna try and do more of these again in the future. I apologize for the huge gap in making these videos, but if you made it all the way through this video, I hope you appreciated it, and definitely check out Preserving Worlds on Means TV. They have a YouTube. Check out my Patreon. I'm doing podcasts very sporadically, but I should have more time to do stuff now. But yeah, anyway, The Given by Dobu Gabu Maru from 2017. Check it out. Bye.